Hey you guys, what is up? Welcome back to another episode here on Gladiator Disc Golf. Today I'm addressing a highly requested video that I've seen on several previous videos in the comments section. People have asked me time and time again if I could do a beginner's bag video, building a beginner's bag, that kind of sort of video, and that's what I'm doing today. Now, just so you know, today is only part one of a two-part series, we'll call it, because there's just so much to talk about and I want to explain some of my disc choices. Okay, so today in part one, we're talking about a beginner's bag, the putters, and the mid-ranges. If you're brand new to the channel, I want to welcome you. Thank you so much for coming and stopping by. Please make sure that you subscribe and hit that notification bell. Alrighty guys, let's talk about this beginner's bag. Now, like I said in the intro, we're talking about putters and mid-ranges. In part two, we'll talk about fairway drivers, and I have a little bit more detail on that in part two. But in part one, I just want to talk about those putters and mids. Now, something that I'm not going to talk about in the putter world is putting putters, okay? So if you're brand new to the game, you're gonna hear a lot of other disc golfers talk about, oh, this is my putter and this is my throwing putter, or they may call it their putting putter and their throwing putter. So in disc golf, a putter can do multiple things. It's what actually goes into the basket when you're inside 60 feet or what you're trying to get into the basket, but also it's a disc that you can throw. That's a slower speed disc, doesn't really turn or fade too much for the most part. And in this respect, when it comes to putting putters, I'm not really going to be recommending any discs for putting putters. And the reason why is that for the most part, inside 30 feet or inside 20 feet, all putters are going to fly the same, okay? And so there's really not too much of a recommendation that can be made based on their flight and based on someone's skill level. Rather, when it comes to a putting putter, you want to really go off of comfort and what feels good in your hand. And if you want more detail, I'll put a tag right up here to watch my beginner's guide to putting that I did a couple months ago, and that will address some of the key things that you're going to want to think about and work on when you're learning how to putt and the things that you want to look for in a putter. But right off the bat, what I'll say in this video is that you want to go with something comfortable for your putting putter, and I do not recommend using premium plastic. For starters, it's expensive, okay? I mean, if, for example, with Innova, if you're putting with a Champion or Star AVR, that's between like a $14 and $20 disc, all right, depending where you get it, and that's just for one disc. Whereas if you use a DX plastic or a KC Pro plastic or even JK plastic, you're looking at somewhere between $8 and $10 per putter. So for the price of one premium putter, you would get one base plastic putter. Also, by not using premium putters, you're not going to have as many grip problems. So premium plastic is great because it holds its flight characteristics the longest, but in different weathers you can also have a lot of grip problems because they can get really, really sticky or really, really slick. Whereas base plastics are going to be influenced by weather as well, but the spectrum for the effects of them is a little less severe, okay? So that's pretty much all I'm going to say about putting putters. Don't use an expensive plastic, use what is comfortable. You're gonna see two kinds between beadless and beaded putters. And when you're starting out, you also wanna use a cheap putter. So this is nothing against Discraft, nothing against Paige Pierce and Paul Macbeth, but if you are brand new to the game, I am not going to recommend that you try a Fierce or a Luna because even though they're kind of base plastic putters, they're like $20 to $25 per putter because of the name and who designed them. And that's really, really expensive. So I would recommend finding some cheaper molds that are easy to find and that are in base plastics that are super affordable, around the $8 to $10 range. So that is putting putters. Now let's go and talk about throwing putters. So in each of the categories, when we're talking about the discs that we're going to throw, I have provided you with 3 discs: understable, stable, and overstable. Now, something to keep in mind is that this is a bag for beginners, okay? So even an overstable disc in this beginner's bag is not going to be super overstable, okay? But it's going to begin to introduce you into the overstable side of things, all right? The other thing about this video is when it comes to these discs that we're throwing, is there are so many discs in the market. There are so many companies that are making discs. There are companies that people haven't even heard of that have some pretty great plastics out there. And so with that, I have only considered 3 companies, or maybe really 3 manufacturers. The discs in this bag are manufactured by Innova, Discraft, or Trilogy. And in Trilogy, for those of you who are brand new to the game, you have Dynamic Discs, you have Latitude 64, and you have Westside Discs. So those 3 companies, and I know Innova manufactures a lot of other companies like Dynamic Discs, or at least they used, not Dynamic Discs, Discmania, or at least they used to for Discmania, and they do manufacture for Legacy, but I haven't included any of those discs. And the main reason why is I wanted to include these 3 really big companies, because if there's any store that sells discs, these are pretty much the 3 companies that you can guarantee that they're going to have. And so for beginners, I wanted to provide you with discs that you can easily find at a Dick's Sporting Goods, at an academy, any other sports store, and then obviously a disc golf store. So before I tell you the different molds that you would want to use, right off the bat, I'm going to recommend that in all of these molds, you try to use a base plastic, okay? Remember, you're a beginner to the game, all right? So for the most part, a lot of you are going to be struggling with form, with nose angle, and a ton of different things. And I don't want you to be discouraged by throwing a more premium plastic disc that's going to be a little bit more overstable, especially with some of the Innova molds. And so for all of these discs, I'm recommending that in their various companies, use the base plastics. So let's talk about throwing putters. For the understable throwing putter, I'm going to recommend the Latitude 64 Pure. Okay, and the Pure has a flight rating of 3 speed, 3 glide, minus 1 turn, and 1 fade. So as a putter, this thing is going to turn right and have, especially when you put some power on it, and then this is all for right hand, backhand, turn right with some power on it, and then have a baby fade at the end. And especially as you continue to practice throwing the Pure, it's going to be a great disc that you'll be able to learn how to hyzer flip. All right, if you want to know how to do that, I'll put the tag here to learn how to hyzer flip as well. But the Pure is a great understable disc. It's available in a lot of places and in a lot of types of plastic. So if you really like it in the base plastic, you may want to go and try it eventually in more premium plastics, because it will hold its flight longer and not turn over too quickly too soon. For the stable putter, for the stable throwing putter, I'm going to recommend the Innova Nova, okay? The Nova is a 2-speed, 3 glide, 0 turn, and 0 fade. So this disc will go pin straight. Now, this disc is very unique in that it's an overmold and it's a little tall. And so if you're coming from Ultimate Frisbee, this is going to be a great disc for you, because it's kind of on the overstable side, okay? Even though it's 0 turn and 0 fade, this disc will hold whatever line you put on it, and when thrown on hyzer, it's going to, depending on how hard you throw it on hyzer, it will flip up a little bit and then finish straight. But this disc is great to learn how to throw straight putter shots, because it's going to give you a lot of clues as to how you're throwing. All right, so the Innova Nova. For the overstable putter, I went a little more overstable in this category than I did with mids and fairway drivers. And that's because a putter has a slower speed, so even beginners will still be able to throw it pretty well. But also, this overstable category is great for beginners to really learn how to forehand. So in this overstable throwing putter category, I recommend between these 2 discs, the Discraft Zone, which is 4 speed, 3 glide, 0 turn, and 3 fade, or the Westside Harp, which is 4-speed, 3 glide, 0 turn, and 2.5 fade. So as you can see, these two discs are very, very similar. They do have slightly different shapes, and so when you're at a disc golf shop, you'll definitely want to hold both of them and kind of see which one fits better in the hand for backhand and forehand. If my memory serves me correct, the zone is a little bit shorter than the Harp. So depending on your hand size, the Harp might feel more comfortable because it's a little bit taller and larger. But both are overstable, both are great for backhand approaches and forehand approaches. There are other overstable mids in the disc golf world, like the Innova Pig, the Innova Rhino, and a couple others. But those discs are a little bit taller and fatter, and I wanted to pick some discs that were slim and really, really great at teaching forehand putter shots. So that is the throwing putter. We have the Latitude 64 Pure, the Innova Nova, and the Discraft Zone or Westside Harp. The next part in this series is talking about mid-ranges, all right? And mid-ranges are a great disc for beginners because they're a little bit faster than putters, but the noses on most mid-ranges are not too narrow and slim that they're hard to control like some drivers. So the mid-ranges for beginners is really going to begin exposing you guys to seeing different flight patterns and getting a little bit more distance. So for mid-ranges in the understable category, I'm going to recommend two discs by the same manufacturer. The first one is the Discraft Comet, okay, which is a 4-speed, 5 glide, minus 2 turn and 1 fade. And if you're coming from Ultimate Frisbee, the Comet might be a great choice for you because of its larger diameter and a little bit more dome, okay? So that's one thing that if you have larger hands, you might really like the Comet because it's a little bit bigger. On the flip side, if you want something smaller, you don't have an Ultimate Frisbee background, you want something that's gonna fit in your hand a little nicer, a newer disc that's been on the market only for about 2 years now is the Discraft Soul. And that is rated at 4-speed, 5 glide, minus 3 turn, and only 0.5 fade. So both of these discs are understable. Both of them will go right when you throw them flat. There is absolutely no doubt about that. And having a disc that understable as a beginner is great because you're going to get a little bit more distance out of it because you won't quite have the power to turn it over most likely. So it's going to turn a little bit and fade, or it'll fly perfectly straight and then fade without being too overstable. Also, the Comet and the Soul are going to really help you learn your angles and release points and hyzer flips. So they're great utility discs to help you learn and grow in disc golf. Now, some of you Discraft fans out there might know a disc called the Meteor. And the Meteor, I've seen it, Brody Smith loves the Meteor, that's his go-to disc. I personally have never thrown the Meteor, but I have thrown the Comet and Soul, and so I'm going to recommend those two discs first. But if you know about the Meteor or you have the Meteor and you've seen it, it is an understable mid-range, it is a great disc, and it really will fill this category for you. So if a buddy has one he's lending to you, don't hesitate to throw the Meteor. It is another great disc that is just as understable as these. It just has a little bit different grip and mold to it, okay? In the stable category, we have the Dynamic Discs Truth, okay? The Dynamic Disc Truth has a flight rating of 5-speed, 5 glide, minus 1 turn, and 1.5 fade. So this disc is certainly more stable than a Soul or a Comet. And as you continue to throw the Truth, you might start seeing this thing called an EMAC Truth, okay? And it's Dynamic Disc has a sponsored player named Eric McCabe, and this is one of his signature discs, or his signature disc to be exact, the EMAC Truth. Now it's a little bit different. It's not the same as a traditional Truth that you would find in like a prime plastic. The EMAC Truth is a little bit flatter, so in theory it's going to fly a little bit faster and it's going to be a little bit more overstable. So if you see an EMAC Truth, you're also probably going to see it in a premium plastic, and if you want to try it, go ahead, but I would first recommend trying just the base plastic, which is prime in Dynamic Discs lineup. throw a prime truth, and that will really help you learn some nice straight shots, and you'll begin to see that nice little S-curve that makes this disc stable and certainly fill this slot. The last disc that we're going to talk about is the overstable mid-range. And in this slot, I have chosen the Innova Roc, which is 4 speed, 4 glide, 0 turn, and 3 fade. Now, like I said in my Innova Roc disc review, the 3 fade is pretty overstable for a disc. However, the Innova Roc is super slow in the sense that it's only a 4 speed. And you'll see some putters that have 4 speeds. And so it's sort of in that middle ground, but it's certainly, I have found it glides more than a lot of other 4-speed putters that are as overstable. And I find that it beats in real nicely. So this overstable putter, the Roc, is slow enough for beginners to really learn how to shape those overstable shots while giving them a nice dome to get that glide. And also what's great about the Roc is not only are there a ton of variations once you move past just the traditional regular Roc, but also it comes in a variety of plastics. Pretty much every single plastic that Innova makes, you can find a Roc or some variation of the Roc in that plastic. So it is super, super accessible, and you will find it everywhere. What's also great about the overstable mid-range slot with the Roc is that you can begin to layer it. And you'll see this not only with Innova pros who throw the Roc, but other sponsor players for other manufacturers. When they throw an overstable mid from that manufacturer, a lot of them will layer it. And because an overstable disc, the more you beat it in, is going to slowly become more understable, okay? And so what you'll see is that, oh man, I really like this mold, it feels great in my hand. I can throw it backhand real nicely. I can maybe even throw it forehand. I want to only throw this mold. Well, now you can then venture into getting it in different plastics and starting to beat one in so it turns a little bit more versus a fresher Roc, which is only going to go straight and then fade. And so there's this really cool experience that a lot of you beginners are going to begin having when you throw overstable mids and base plastics and you start seeing the wear and tear and how you can layer them real nicely. So to summarize, for the mid-range discs, you have the option in the understable with the Discraft Comet or Discraft Soul. The stable mid-range, I recommend the Dynamic Discs Truth. And then the overstable mid-range, I recommend the Innova Roc. All right. Now, those are just 6 or 8 discs technically, with the 2 choices in both the overstable putter and the understable mid. 8 disc choices that you can choose from to start building your bag between the throwing putters and the mid-ranges. Guys, there are so many other choices out there, but I just wanted to provide you with some quality discs that have great reputations, and there's a lot of accessibility to these molds. Right? Let me know in the comments below which of these discs that you've already tried out, you're looking forward to trying out, or if you said, you know what, I appreciate that recommendation for that stable mid, but I really liked throwing this mid instead. And let me know what you're throwing in these slots, guys. I'm really interested to hear what you guys are putting in your bags. And that's basically it for part 1. We've talked about throwing putters and mids, and I gave you just a little bit of advice on finding your perfect putting putter. Well, that's all I have for you today, guys. Until next time, have a great round.